Hi everybody, welcome back to Between the Lines. My name's Julian, I'm an obsessive reader and used book collector, and welcome to my new setup. I just moved, and unfortunately, if you were a fan of my previous setup with the movie poster and the whiteboard, that is no longer going to be the case. I'm in a new room now. It's a bigger space, so I'm excited to actually have some breathing room to film, as opposed to just a kind of 5 feet by 2 feet space that I was dealing with before. So along with moving, it was also recently my birthday a few weeks ago, and I did receive some books. And of course, go out for a monthly book haul, which I used my birthday as an excuse to buy a little bit more than I usually do. So I have a bunch of books that I want to talk about today and show it to all of you because I found some really cool stuff. And if you haven't been able to tell, I bought a new mic. This is my first video with it, so we're gonna see how well the sound quality is, but it seems pretty good so far. All right, so the first book I picked up in this haul here is The Best of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is just a collection of Sherlock Holmes stories, not all of the short stories, and of course none of the novels in this one, but I love Sherlock Holmes. He's one of my favorite detectives. So being a fan of the genre itself, of course, I've read a bunch of Sherlock Holmes, and these books are so easy to come by. I mean, it's not too hard to find Sherlock Holmes stuff, especially if you're on ebook. You can buy the entire collected set for a couple dollars, but I just saw this there and thought it was pretty nice, so I added it to my collection, and I've read a bunch of these short stories in the past, but not all of them. So if I'm looking for something to jump into, something quick as kind of a palate cleanser between bigger sci-fi or fantasy books, I'm definitely going to jump into this. Next up, we have Invasion of the Body Snatchers by Jack Finney. Invasion of the Body Snatchers is probably most known to people through the movie adaptations, of which there have been several. I'm a huge fan of the original 1950s version and the 70s version, the one that had Jeff Goldblum and Donald Sutherland and also Leonard Nimoy. That is a great movie. That's probably in my top 10 favorite horror movies, the 70s version. But I haven't seen all the adaptations. I believe there's one that was made in the 90s by Abel Ferrara, which is something that sounds very interesting that I'd like to check out. I haven't been able to find it anywhere though. There's also countless others of movies that have been inspired by this book, not necessarily a direct adaptation, but you got movies like The World's End, which takes the premise of people being swapped out for replicated versions of them, aliens, robots. There's been a bunch of them in the different movies, but this is such a staple of cinema, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, so of course I want to read the original source material and kind of see where this story came from. Next up, we have The Chalk Man by C.J. Tudor. This is a book I had never heard of, but months ago I was watching a Lady Jane Books video and she had recommended this book. I forget exactly which video it was in, but in the way she talked about it made it sound really compelling and a mix between sort of a mystery and a Stephen King book. And I was like, okay, that sounds pretty up my alley, so I'd like to check this one out. And I was pretty surprised, honestly, to find this at a used store because it's a relatively new book. And it's funny, it even says on the back cover here by Stephen King, if you like my stuff, you'll like this. So outside of that though, I don't know too much about the book, and this is one I probably won't get into relatively soon. Maybe I'll save it for spooky season in October. Next up, we have Dawn by Octavia E. Butler. This is a sci-fi author I've been dying to get into. I have heard so many great things about Octavia Butler, and especially the books Parable of the Sower and the short stories that she's written. And I believe this book is one that is fairly well known. It's in the Xenogenesis series. Yeah, it says it right here. It's book 1 of the Xenogenesis series. And this isn't the one I was necessarily intending to start with her works, but since I found it at the used store, might as well go from here. I've heard so many great things about this author and the unique lens and perspective she brings to science fiction, especially having come from a lot of very classic hard sci-fi authors that I've been reading lately this year. So it'll be a nice change up, and hopefully it'll be a good introduction to her works as well. Next up, we have Out of Sight by Elmore Leonard. This is another author like Octavia Butler that I've been meaning to get into for a long time, but didn't necessarily know where to start. And the library has a ton of Elmore Leonard books, so it didn't really help in deciding where to begin. But since I found this one at the used store, I figure, okay, this sounds like a good one to start with, especially since I'm familiar with the movie, the George Clooney movie that came out in the early 2000s or late 90s, I believe. It's been a while since I saw that movie, a long while actually, so I don't remember much about the plot. So it'll be kind of a nice way to ease me into the works of Elmore Leonard, to understand the writing style, and to get into that crime fiction that I've heard so many people talk about how great it is. The next book is Burning Chrome by William Gibson. If you've been following my channel at all, you know I was a huge fan of Neuromancer. It was such a unique and interesting cyberpunk book, and my first foray into the cyberpunk genre in books as opposed to just movies and video games. I was really taken aback by how cool that book was, and I wanted to learn more about this world that William Gibson had created in that book. And of course, doing so, I learned that there were sequels, of which I have yet to start reading because I only have book 3. I haven't been able to locate book 2 yet. But I also found out that there was a short story collection which took place in the Neuromancer world and had all the cool cyberpunk elements that were involved in that book. So loving short stories and loving Neuromancer, how could I not pick this one up? Next is The Discovery of Poetry by Frances Mays. Poetry is something that has constantly eluded me. It's something I've tried to understand over and over again and to get into, and I haven't been able to really wrap my head around it thus far. I've gotten close to really getting into poetry. I was reading a lot of Billy Collins over the last couple of years, especially his book, The Trouble with Poetry, which was really accessible, especially for somebody who has a hard time with poetry. And then I found out about this book, which serves as an introduction to poetry and gives more of a holistic explanation of it as opposed to just diving in deep and trying to make what you will of the works themselves. I'm a person who likes to kind of go the studious route with learning something new. I like to learn the background and the facts and the technical details about something before really wrapping my head around it. So hopefully, while not being a total instruction manual about reading and writing poetry, this book will give me some insights to finally get my head into the space where I can fully appreciate it. And the last book I picked up from retail in this haul here is The Complete Chronicles of Conan by Robert E. Howard. This is a gorgeous hardcover that I've been wanting for a very long time and finally made the move to pick up for this little birthday haul. Having finished the complete works of Lovecraft last October, I was looking for something else to get into that was similar, where I could kind of just jump into a short story, get into a classic author's work, and get into a new world that they've created. And in thinking about that, I had realized that, Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard were in correspondence with each other. They were contemporaries. So there was a lot of crossover between the works. I believe Robert E. Howard wrote some works in the Lovecraft mythos. And in listening to the podcast that I would go through with H.P. Lovecraft, the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast, they talked a lot about Robert E. Howard and even covered some of his works. And, I'm familiar with the movie Conan the Barbarian. Of course, I've seen it. It's kind of a silly movie and it's very dated, but there's something about this world that has captivated me, that classic, really throwback type of fantasy, the sword and sorcery, pre-medieval Europe kind of fantasy stuff. That's something that sounds really alluring and different from what I'm used to, having read a lot of that type of fantasy now. So this is a collection that I think I'm going to start getting into in the summer, read one of these short stories every once in a while. I'm going to take it slow like I did with the Lovecraft one. That one took me 3 years to finish. I don't think it's going to necessarily take me that long. I think Howard's writing is a bit more accessible and less wordy than Lovecraft, so probably not as long. But this is definitely one I'm very happy to have on my short story collection shelf. And the last book in this book haul is one that my brother bought for me. This is something I've been looking for a while. If you've been following the channel, you know that I'm reading the Wheel of Time books. I finished The Shadow Rising book 4 a few weeks ago, and I'm planning on starting The Fires of Heaven sometime this month. In the last about year or so, I've been collecting the books from used stores, trying to complete my collection, and it took me months and months to finally get all the books, except for the last one, A Memory of Light. I wasn't really able to find it, especially with that really gorgeous Michael Whelan cover in used shops. It's just, I think it's a book that a lot of people want to hold on to. But my brother, who fortunately works at a bookstore, was able to go through his channels and find the awesome hardcover edition from that initial printing, not the recent ones with a different cover. But he found for me and bought A Memory of Light, the final book in the Wheel of Time. And especially considering it's a hardcover, which just makes my collection look great. All the Brandon Sanderson ones, the final 3 books I have in hardcover now. So, and it all conveniently sits on one shelf. I don't know if you can see behind me, but the shelf right about my eye level is just Wheel of Time books, and they all fit perfectly there, except for the hardcover I have of Path of Daggers and The World of the Wheel of Time, which are just bonuses for me. But for the main series that I'm actually gonna read, they're all on one shelf, and I just absolutely love this cover. It's so gorgeous. I know that someone else, I believe it was just one artist, drew all the covers for the previous books in the Wheel of Time, so I guess it kind of sucks that they didn't do the last one, but I adore Michael Whelan's work, especially what he did in The Dark Tower. I just absolutely love his style, and to see that here with The Wheel of Time and to have this one as opposed to the newer covers and in hardcover is something I really truly appreciate and can't wait to get into. Can't wait to continue this series. I'm really loving it, although I am taking my time with it to not get burnt out because it's such a long and somewhat daunting series, but I'm enjoying every second of it. So that's it for my birthday book haul. I hope you enjoyed watching this, and I hope you like my new setup. I'm still working out the kinks as to how to design this place, but we'll find something good in the next few videos. I am going to be posting more frequently now. It has been a couple weeks on and off that I've been posting, but now that I'm finally moved in and settled, I'll hopefully go back to my initial posting schedule of 1 to 2 videos a week. So hopefully I'll see you again soon. I hope you enjoyed some of the books in my haul here. If you've read any of these, let me know if you enjoyed them or not. And the books I talked about being sort of entry points into authors' works, let me know if those are in fact actually good entry points or if I should hold out for something else. So before you go, remember to do all the YouTube stuff I always ask for, like liking and subscribing. It really helps out when you do that. And as always, thank you for watching. Please remember to support your local library, and I'll see you next time.